Now, Japanese officials still battling to prevent a meltdown at the Fukushima nuclear plant where 4 reactors have been damaged. These plants, they were all built in the 1970s. They contain boiling water reactors. Now, there are more than 20 of the same type of reactors operating here in the U.S. About a dozen of them, like this one here in Illinois, taking a look, are owned by Exelon Corporation. They operate the largest group of U.S. nuclear plants. And I spoke with the company's chief executive, John Rowe, in an exclusive interview earlier this afternoon, and I asked him what this all means for nuclear power as a commercial energy source.
Well, I think natural gas is queen for a long time. It gives you a lot of advantages economically, and it allows you to take time and work out the mix of renewables and nuclear in the future in an orderly way. So I think gas is queen for a long time. But the kind of things you describe deal with financial risk. What we're talking about in this interview is public health risk. And there is no absolutely riskless form of energy. Natural gas worries some people because there have been a few explosions, and there have also been places where the cracking of the shale to get more gas raises environmental questions. Coal, EPA just announced its new hazardous air pollutants regulation today. Most of that mercury and arsenic and other things comes from the burnings of coal. And far more people have been killed in coal mines than have ever been killed by nuclear plants. And, you know,
there's no free lunch.
There's no free lunch in energy. I have the good fortune or the big challenge, whichever way you want to look at it, of working in an area where everything brings economic costs and everything brings risks with it. And we simply try to do an honest and honorable job of telling people what those costs and what those risks are.
I want to bring water into the conversation because I've been reading lately about how nuclear power plants could be a very good source of energy in order to desalinate water. And we know that water is becoming a more precious resource throughout the world. Is that an area that nuclear power experts are looking at? And what is the relationship between the energy industry, such as yours, and the water business?
Well, historically, we use water. We don't produce it. And I'm afraid I think that will be the case for a very long time to come. I can envision lots of grand futures for nuclear power, electrolyzing water to make hydrogen for fuel for cars, or desalinating water for potable consumption. You know, personally, I don't think most of those visions are realistic. I think both economics and the kind of concerns we're going to be facing after these events in Japan will keep nuclear power to a narrower role than that.
Exelon Corporation operates the largest fleet of nuclear power plants in the United States, and many are of the same type that have been damaged in Japan, those boiling water reactors. I spoke with Exelon's chief executive, John Rowe, in an exclusive interview this afternoon. I asked him if the American nuclear industry has offered assistance to the Japanese.
The Nuclear Energy Institute, of which we are members, has offered assistance from all of the American companies, but the Japanese are a skillful and technologically focused people. They haven't asked for very much yet, to the best of my knowledge. If there's any specialized area where they need someone that we could provide, of course we would do so instantly.
Now, any type of natural disaster, as horrific as it is, combined in this case with the potential for radiation and the onset of anything having to do with the nuclear power plants there, obviously raises questions about the future of nuclear energy here in the United States as well as around the world. Do you think that this is going to change the way Americans particularly look at nuclear power as maybe a carbon-free footprint power, and they're not going to be able to rely on it anymore?
I don't think it will go quite as far as the last part of your sentence, But of course it will cause Americans to take a fresh look. After many years of extraordinary safety in this country, we had reached a point where we had a much higher level of public confidence. And that will obviously be changed by this event. But I think the important thing to realize is that at the present time in the United States, new power reactors are not economical anyway. With low load growth and very cheap natural gas-fired generation is now the economic way of choice to produce low-carbon electricity, and that will be true for at least a decade. So the American people will have a lot of time to watch their government and the utility industry learn from this terrible event and respond with proper gravity and learning.
How does the utility industry in the United States deal with that challenge? Because at least right now, nuclear power plants are very profitable for the corporations, and yet, as you describe it, building gas-fired plants takes less time than building a nuclear plant, 2 years versus 10 years, and the cost is much lower to build a new natural gas-fired plant than it does to build a nuclear power plant.
Correct. Electric companies are in different circumstances. Some, like the Southern Company, which has started to build 2 nuclear plants, are what we call fully regulated, and there, how much money they make and how they collect the revenue is fully controlled by the State Utility Commission. Exelon sells power in competitive markets. And for us, new nuclear power plants simply aren't economic. What goes on here is that the new reviews that will be required as a result of this accident will have some effect, I hope a modest one, but some effect on the cost of continuing to operate our nuclear plants and on the profits we obtain from them in a competitive market. But again, I reiterate, for us, the choice on the margin has been clear. A new nuclear power plant is not economic for us compared to new gas combined cycle power plants.
Now, if you were to look into the future, maybe 10, even 15 years, do you think that the amount of electricity generated by nuclear power for Exelon, now about 90%, do you have any idea what that number would be in the future?
Well, I think it will stay roughly the same for a decade or so, because I believe we will be able to add some capacity to our different plants. We will, of course, give that a fresh look in the wake of this event. In the longer run, Exelon will be adding more gas, more wind, and as it becomes more economic, more solar to our fleet. And so I would anticipate for a company like Exelon that the nuclear percentage will go down. But as you pointed out earlier, we are already much the highest percentage. We believe our nuclear plants are safe. We run them very well with very devoted people. We think they're the biggest, best low-carbon source of energy in the country. But again, on the margin, we will be looking more to other sources over that 10 to 15-year period you described.
Now, as you get to that 10 to 15-year period, you've got to go through permitting processes if indeed you want to change the profile of your nuclear fleet. And in Texas, for example, I believe that you've gone through a pre-permitting process to try to determine maybe you would expand nuclear power there. What's the status there?
We looked at a new nuclear plant very seriously in 2008. When natural gas prices fell, we decided that was not economic. We wanted to get the site approved for future use. We will now work less hard on that because with gas price forecasts very low, we still have no government-approved ultimate place to put the spent fuel. And now this event, I think the possibility of building a new nuclear plant goes very far out on Exelon's horizon.
Exelon Corporation, the utility, it operates 17 nuclear reactors throughout the United States. It's the largest nuclear power plant operator in the nation. And earlier today, I spoke with Exelon's chief executive, John Rowe, in an exclusive interview. And I asked him how similar Exelon's reactors are to those that are melting down, perhaps, in Japan.
Well, all of the reactors we own, and we are the largest nuclear power company in the United States, are similar in some ways and different in some ways than the Japanese reactors. But of our reactors, Oyster Creek in New Jersey, the Dresden and Quad Cities in plants in Illinois are the closest in design to the Japanese reactors, and even there are significant differences. Our reactors are designed for lower levels of seismic risk because we have lower levels of seismic risk. Most of them are not designed from tsunamis because tsunamis don't affect Illinois very much. They have other kinds of protection for tornadoes and hurricanes and so forth that go into the design too. We are trying very hard to be certain that the differences in our plants and the differences in the safety procedures that we have in the event of natural disasters keep them safe for our neighbors, for our employees, and of course ultimately for our shareholders. We reviewed them with our board oversight committee yesterday. Our management believes they're safe. I believe they're safe. And as the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has stated, they too believe they're safe.
Have you done anything in response to what you've learned from, at least in the initial reports of what is happening in Japan? Have you initiated any changes in either the way you have oversight or the way that you're dealing with potential safety issues?
We're looking very closely. All you can do in a few days is look. And we have established a management task force to look. We know that the NRC will conduct new natural disaster safety reviews for our plants. So we're hiring some outside experts to help us respond to those inquiries when they come. I've asked each of our site managers to pay attention to what they have, make certain that they believe what they have are safe. I addressed a group of our employees at one of our power plants the other day and assured them that if they keep these plants safe, as they will, they are the best ambassadors to their neighbors because they work there.
Now, some of the issues related to the plants in Japan, specifically the Fukushima Daiichi plant, have to do, it appears, with the water level in at least the storage facility. The idea being that you've got these spent rods of nuclear fuel and you want to keep them covered with water. Have you heard anything about this design or about this situation in Japan that would be similar to any of the situations that exist in these similar kinds of plants in the United States?
Again, you must keep all reactor fuel covered in water after it has been irradiated. Now, the situation at the Japanese plants, to the best of my knowledge, and most of my knowledge comes from the same places your knowledge comes from, is different among the 4 plants. In 3 of the 4, the issue has been keeping water covering the fuel in the reactor vessels themselves. In the 4th plant, the issue has been keeping water in the spent fuel pool covered. These are different technical issues, but the common thing is you have to keep water there in all cases, and common to all nuclear plants in the world, or at least all that use water as a coolant, this is a common factor. The issue is how much protection do you have to make sure, first, that your off-site power is available if the reactor is shut down, second, that your backup diesel generators work, third, that they and their fuel supplies are protected from the natural disasters. We have begun a fresh review, but our backup generators were reviewed for this by NRC on prior occasions and by our management on prior occasions. So we believe we will continue to find that we have adequate levels of protection around our backup generators. But we would be arrogant indeed not to take a fresh look and view of this tragic situation.